volume and complete recycle of minor actinides for transportation in the same system, exclusion of pure fissile materials. All this is way beyond me for a student of social sciences, and arrangement of all procedures in remote systems. This is more for our own understanding, and to assist the development and new fuel cycles and facilities and activities are all planned. The pilot and industrial facilities for fuel production, including MOX fuel, on which there is a dilly-dallying in the United States, and investigations of fuel cycle processes will be created. Generation 4 demonstration reactor systems are also planned under the new federal task program for 2008, nuclear energy technologies of new generation. Allow me to conclude. Nuclear power accounted for 41% of net electricity generation in Bulgaria, according to 2000 plus statistics. Can the Russians facilitate collaboration with Bulgaria, because they are into a trilateral agreement with them, with one more country? The Australian government is open to supporting an international fuel ban, but they don't have much of a friendly disposition towards India. But the technical expertise for fuel cycle waste disposal technologies, the informed in this gathering, I'm sure, know about SynRock, that is a proliferation resistant rock which the Australians have created artificially, and that solves some of the proliferation problems, I believe. Then, can the Russians, who are also into negotiation, or the Australians are into negotiation with the Russians, can we gain some benefits from that discussion? Brazil has a synergetic mix of large uranium reserves, fuel cycle technology, pressurized water reactors technology, and non-proliferation as a concern. This will provide an important contribution to assurances of supply both globally and locally. As a BRIC member, what can Brazil offer us, and how can Russia facilitate cooperation? Will the Russian government be willing to work with India in bilateral, trilateral modes for assured fuel supplies, especially having worked both as a socialist government and as a democratic government? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention.
Very interesting presentation, and you give a lot of data, and I'm sure it will be useful. I'm happy that you collected a lot of information from Russia also on this technology. Yes, while thanking, let's go move on to the next paper. This is by our dear Dr. Professor Misra. This is on power sector reforms and privatization in case of India. Professor Misra.
Dr. Venkateshwara, Chief Marker, my Russian friends and esteemed participants. I have very limited contention to put forward. We had a very good discussion on reforms. Often we say that privatization is a path which will lead us to reforms. And I think it's a contentious issue. And that the evidence that we have collected on reforms in energy sector, it I think very well proves that ownership change has not given us much. No, Mr. Venkateshwara was talking about Karnataka, and I don't think anybody can speak better than him, because he himself is on the board of Karnataka Power Corporation, which I understand makes the highest profits of any enterprise of that sort at the state level. I understand there are 75 utilities at the state level in our country, and your utility is making the highest profit. We have the Odisha experience.
Try to privatize and 30, 35 private enterprises get forward. That somehow, I don't know, but the best well-known reasons to them, they are not started at all.
So, you know,
So ultimately, it has become the sustenance, the Karnataka Power Corporation.
what the chair told, I think, is very interesting. You know, he made a very interesting observation, and he was quoting Mr. Bhabha, Homija Bhabha, that the cost of no power is never more than no power.
Yeah.
I think that's the issue in this country. How long we can keep people waiting for power? If they can transform their own future, they can transform their own destiny, they can transform the future of the country, then why should not we provide? And in the task of doing that, which thought that private sector will come in a big way and help us in energy sector reforms. Now, when we talk of energy sector reforms, whether it is coal sector reform, it is thermal power sector reform, it is hydropower sector reform, it is renewable sources of power sector reforms, or power sector reform in the field of nuclear energy. The evidence is that it just doesn't work that way. And I'll just take a couple of minutes. Let us say flawed in distribution reforms of all the kinds of reforms that we have been talking. And what has been found is that TMD losses have not come down. Now, so-called state like Chhattisgarh, we can talk of Rajasthan. In Rajasthan, we started power sector reforms with a big bang. There is not much of decline there. You can take the case of Andhra Pradesh. We say that there is decline, but I find that the decline is very, very marginal. And not to go too far, let's talk about Delhi itself. Because you say Delhi is the nerve center of the country. And I find that in Delhi also, having introduced power sector reforms, TMD losses have gone up from 43% to 46%.
They are not TMD losses.
So, I think it's very, very interesting to say and observe that distribution reforms have not been a very, very great success. You can take the case of receivables, I think, and we find that most of the distribution authorities in our Andhra Pradesh also, we have receivables above a given limit. That's the state, I think, of receivables, I think, in different countries. Can they disconnect power, I think, as we see that exists in the case of UK and many other countries? Can we do that? Receivables are mounting. I myself, been with several, a large part of workshops that have done, they can be thinking that these reforms will give them the opportunity to do much more, and that in the new setup of private sector they will be able to do, or when we have introduced privatization, we will be able to deliver much more. But unfortunately, that has not happened, and we find now, I think, the workforce also in this distribution authority is a highly demotivated workforce. Distribution costs are again very, very high, and Mr. Ranganathan was talking. We can take the case of power sector reforms in Odisha. Initially, we talked a lot about power sector reforms, and we see that later, I think, power sector reforms, they, in a way, they disappointed us. I think the question comes back whether we have really benefited by from trafficating the power sector authorities in our country. Is it that we have created more number of offices? Have we created greater cost? Have we given rise to, I think, greater problems of coordination? Not to go too far, I know about my own state, Andhra Pradesh. At one point in time, people in Minnesota, they were moving from one story to another story. But now we say that they don't go because if there are 3 or 4 corporations working there and there is no communication between 4th floor, 3rd floor and 2nd floor. Now this is a very, very interesting case. Distribution cost, they have increased. And then when we talk of regulatory reforms, we talk a lot about regulatory reforms. But there are a couple of problems. One is capture of regulator. And I think Venkateshwara is just working because you have become a professional. And you find that, in the case of regulatory authorities, they are totally manned by rights officers. I have nothing to say against rights officers because they are competent like Mr. Venkateshwara, we are proud of them. But what happens is that, on the one hand, you say that they will be independent. On the one hand, they say that they can direct the state. But what happens is that you bring them people who can be doing bidding on what you say. That has happened in the case of Andhra Pradesh. That has happened in the case of Delhi. Has happened in the case of Haryana. There are stories after stories. And then there is the question of the absence of requisite competencies. I was going through the composition of the regulatory board of a particular electricity regulatory commission. And we found that they have put a person who is a retired chief of income tax department. So it's very difficult to understand how does it bring, what kind of competencies they bring. Then they brought CNDG, a retired CNDG has been brought and has been put on the regulatory board. At the same time, we also feel that at times government wants regulation, but government doesn't want to pay the cost of regulation. If you want to put people, you have to pay them a lot also. And one very good example is a little, different, but we have seen in a number of cases, we have seen that these salaries of these people who are in the regulatory board, have been capped, and it cannot go beyond the salary of the cabinet secretary or the chief secretary of a particular state. That means you can't be having people who have, have a great expertise, and maybe that we can't be paying for all that they do for us, but we are not in a position to pay a token price of them. The fourth thing is the lack of research. We have created authority, but we don't take up any fundamental research. That is when we talk of billing, heavy billing, that content of taking up problems on their own and then connecting it to policy making through regulatory authorities, through authorities which are involved in the process of reforms, that is not at all there. A very wide survey of, let's say, consumers. What do they feel about the distribution? What do they feel about the power bills? What do they feel about tariffs? That's not there. And the interaction between power generating authorities with people, the interaction of transmission authorities with people, that is not there. And that it has also been found that the way we man these organizations, we don't create a team which is a harmonious team. I found in many cases, even at the central level and at the state level, we don't find good communication, even at the board level. I think we should throw more light on that. At times it has been found that the chief of the organizations hardly any time to talk with the functional directors in the agreement. The meeting between chief and functional directors is not there. At times when the review is made by chief minister and chief minister, because the functional directors and the head of the organization, just the task of Genco, they make different kind of assumptions and they give different kind of inputs or information. Transmission reforms. I find that we always talk of reforms, and I have learned from you. We talk of reforms, but in a country like India, we don't need reforms. It's such a big country, we need here a new form. We need here, I think, new kind of systems. And what you find that the innovations, today I think Ajay Jansa was saying, I think innovations, they should be the hub, I think, for change. But unfortunately, what happens is that we discount them, and whatever new authorities and bodies we create, in new authorities and bodies, whatever space is there, that space we fill up. Again, I think the red tape and bureaucratic procedures and systems. And we don't experiment, I think, with the kind of change that should come. Again, in generating reforms, there are problems. One is deficient MOUs. In one case, one state government didn't allow even the regulatory authority to have access to MOUs. And I was taken aghast when I came to know that in one case, the formula for rate of return was worked out in such a way which would lead simply to the extortion of money from the state. In the sense that they took, initially, they were calculating the rate of return on the capital employed. And this particular private sector company was a group company, and that particular group was including the capital employed of other units also over here. And this went on. In fact, CIG found it, but ultimately I think it just ended over there. And a low rate of return was shown. They wanted more and more, and we found that many programs of the state companies were financed through the funding that otherwise was coming from through this generating company. So lack of transparency is there. One very important thing is absence of benchmarks. We see that we have created benchmarks. Our people in this country, most of them, they are busy from morning to evening to make 2 ends meet. They have hardly any time to take up, to take a culture, for fighting out and for their own problems. And what has been found is that in the name of reform, the benchmarks that we have developed, these benchmarks are highly questionable. You can take the case of, let's say, Orissa. When we talk of Orissa, and we say that if there is a tripping or if lights they just go off, it may take 15 days time. As per their order, it may take 15 days time to put the house in order. Then if there is an interruption and with a low voltage cycle, if it has got to be corrected, it will take 30 days time. Now I think of this kind of benchmarks, they just don't reach us anywhere. We have to take up, I think, very hard though. I don't think somebody told that low and high end, shallow is no crime, but low end is crime. In our case, in NMO reforms, we are putting very, very low kind of standards. And I am sure that I think maybe that we were better before privatization. I think we had more stricter standards before privatization, but in the name of privatization, the kind of benchmark that we have put, they are very, very low. And sir, in this paper, you will find that we have given a table, maybe that we can't strictly compare the UK benchmarks or benchmarks of other countries with our own benchmarks, but we cannot be too far away also from that. If we have put our foot in that direction, then I think we have to cover more and more space instead of going backward. So I think these are very great challenges, and ultimately what I think I would like to say is that when we talk energy sector reforms, yes, in the name of energy sector reforms, certainly we can benefit from private sector, but it must be a win-win situation. Private sector should benefit, at the same time private sector should not make it a source of increasing their own profits and the profits for the group companies. If that happens, I think that's a very, very sad. Thank you.
Beautiful talk, and you gave the different issues that are to be attended to and to be corrected also. And very nice talk, my dear Professor Visaji. Before I give the floor for summarizing to Dr. Nagy. Questions? Any questions? Yeah, the time is also short. Yes, any questions, please?
Yes, I have one.
At the end? Yes.
Can I ask now?
Why not?
No, this question is actually to Mr. Shah. He was talking about the inefficient benchmarks. Now,
There is Mr.
inefficient benchmarks are going to be there all the time. Except you create new benchmarks by other organizations. Is that not, does that not give an argument for privatization? That alone will not solve the problem, because we are of course in the land of Satyam, and therefore we need to be fully aware of the need for governance. Now, I would say that the governance capacity is to be improved a lot, because there is always this information asymmetry between the regulator and the regulator, and therefore unless this is done, so what does he think in terms of a private sector governed by an informed regulator? Number one. And another thing is, I just wanted to ask, he talked about the Delhi TNT loss going up. I have not seen that figure. In fact, Delhi TNT loss has come down because it is in their bid parameter that the loss will be coming down. In fact, if it goes up, it will eat into their profits. So, thank you.
Mr. Visaji would like to
And one would fully agree that if we can take care of our own house and can develop our own systems and procedures, we can certainly deliver better. As a there, I would like to make a small observation. You see that in most of these utilities, unfortunately even today, things are little better. They didn't have good accounting systems and procedures. Let's say power, in energy sector, in government, in uranium, or let's say atomic energy sector. No costing standards at one time, no consumption standards were there. Internal audit has been very, very poor. In fact, I studied 10 actually boards as a part of the World Bank study. And in one case, board had a very big revenue, but they have not sent anybody for one day training program during the last 30 years. This is not too far. where Andhra Pradesh will be better, I think I'm going to go Maharashtra. Not that. I was taken aback to know that they think that training is illegal and we should know that. So, of course, Mr. Andhra must be complimented of that. Only one thing Karnataka, Maharashtra is very advanced state. But budgetary procedures, internal audit there, taxing system there, consumption norms, the management of contracts, not to go too far. In the case of Andhra Pradesh, at one point of time, they had about 1,500 small, job projects. And total turnover was 4,000 crores, and money that was locked up in this 1,500 job projects was about 3,000 crores. They didn't even know how much money was there, locked up in this project. Things were so bad, and still they continue to bad. In the case of one power sector enterprise, they don't even know which loan was taken in which year and what rate of interest. So I fully agree with you. I think the first thing that we have to do is to ensure that we have a good corporate governance system within the enterprise at the board level, at levels below that, in terms of systems and in terms of procedure. If that is not there, I don't think we can go too far. Regarding Delhi, you might be right, because I have figures till 1993. Not that I have selectively taken those figures.
I would like to add a point there. In the context of Delhi, initially when it transferred from the public utility to a private, the losses went down because more losses were reported at that point of time. Then there was an agreement between the private entity that they will systematically bring it down. So when it got transferred from public to private, the losses suddenly shot. I think that's what he was saying.
So I think that's
That does not negate what I said.
Yeah, it doesn't. But he was probably referring to this
The
particular.
earlier figures. Yeah. Well, I think, yes, okay, just quick one, please.
Mr. Shivkumar has expressed I'm an energy person. Shivkumar expressed his paper that this crisis of the power has it not affected the political mandate like Bijli Sadak Pani, and it's a very unique thing Venkateshwara mentioned it, that they have made an investment in Hassilgarh. Is that because of the same political party ruling below the state?
The Chhattisgarh has certain advantages. Chhattisgarh, what I said, raw material. They have several advantages over Karnataka. Karnataka, we have exhausted all the whatever raw material is possible. Maybe secondly, as you rightly said, the same parties are in power. They have an advantage. So the rapport is there. In fact, before elections, this MOU took place. But to the good luck of Karnataka government, again BJP has come to power there. In fact, we were all wondering, suppose opposition has come into power, what would have happened to this deal? But luckily, the same government has come, and the deal is through now. And we have already invested some money there. And things are happening. Hopefully by 2009, we will be able to get to the end of 2009 some power from Chhattisgarh. But this is a very good experiment, irrespective of the political affiliations. If somewhere some material is available, raw material, then shortage. I think India produces something like 1,40,000 megawatts, and we need more than 3 lakh megawatts. So naturally we are lots of shortage, 50% shortage. So instead of importing or instead of depending on others, importing always costs more money. So why not within the country? So that way it is a very good example.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, we had a wonderful session. I think before I give the floor to our Dr. Negi, I'm sure you recall our father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi, has said, we should plan now what we need to the future generation. I mean, that's the kind of a thing what Mahatma Gandhi has said. In that context, I mean, this one projection I want to show up at the end. And the projection that is made up to 2050, I mean, where we are, how we are going to be, all available, the quality-wise, and also the expected and anticipated resources
energy resources were taken into account: hydroelectric, non-conventional, coal, hydrocarbon, and nuclear domestic three-stage program, whatever we take. And by quality, different numbers are generated by different groups, as I was mentioning earlier. By about 2050, we need around 1400 gigawatt electric. This is what is the projected one. And with the available resources, whatever we have, and it is not possible to meet the requirement, and the deficit will be around 400 gigawatt electrical, and the required coal to be imported is around 1.6 billion tons in 2050. And if we don't import any reactors or fuel, because our fuel shortage is there as of today, I'm talking about the requisite quality of uranium. And the deficit to be filled up by the LWR imports. The Russians are already having, gave us 2 reactors are already under advanced stages of construction. 2 is already given, as Dr. Josna also was telling. That is a December 2008 agreement was signed. Next one, please. Can I show the next one? This is the last one. Here. Well, in order to what you call to fill up the gap or deficit by 2050, and this is a projected requirement, the top one, and practically there will be nothing, but deficit will be there, provided we take action now, 2012, 2020. In this, we have to have what you call light water reactors of the order of around 40 gigawatt electrical, and by that, and then it is easy for us to meet all the requirement. And this is the top portion is the first grade reactor using spent fuel from LWR. That way, this is the LWR imported, and whatever the plutonium that is generated in this will be used in the first grade reactors, so that we are putting good amount of faith in the first grade reactor to meet the energy requirement up to 2050. That is, in other words, this large, not only a short-term strategy, a long-term strategy is required for having a good energy security. Well, with these few words, I would like to thank every one of you, and we had a very beautiful presentations by our Russian colleague here, and then later by Dr. Josna, and of course a beautiful talk by our Professor Misraji, and then I will give the floor by thanking everyone around the table here, and also the people who are sitting here. I would like to give the floor to our Dr. Negi to sum up briefly.
Thank you very much, sir. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Misra for giving me an opportunity to participate in this workshop, in which I can see are being discussed all important issues concerning energy security and the implementation of the reforms policy of the government. In all the countries, in the context, as you may be aware, the government's aim is to sustain the growth rate 8 to 10% in the next 25 years. The country requires to add 25,000 megawatts per year in the next 25 years, which requires solid efforts to utilize all domestic energy resources, as you have also mentioned in your presentation. This session was very interesting, which covered all important aspects of the energy security, and also the geopolitical issues which Madam has touched on the Russian side. Sir has talked about the government's concern, the government policy about the growth of the requirement of the growth in the nuclear energy sector, which has received considerable importance in India's integrated energy policy, which was published, which was brought out by Planning Commission in 2006. Mr. Sri Kumar has focused, has highlighted programs that are being implemented by PREAS in the nuclear energy sector, particularly in the nuclear energy sector. I think that's all.
Election sector, the election sector. And then Madam has given a very special talk, Madam Sergey Lodov. She has discussed the Russian concern about the energy security, especially in the geopolitical context, and also how you are interacting with the neighboring countries, EU and the other countries, specifically in the sector with special focus on nuclear energy. Mr. Venkatas Rao was given a very focused presentation on the growth of the power sector in the Karnataka sector. It was very interesting to know that the Karnataka has made significant achievements in the installed capacity, from 600 megawatt to 6,000 megawatt by 2009, and still there is around 4,000 megawatt deficit in the country, which we have mentioned in your presentation. And then there was a presentation given by Dr. Jyotsna, who has highlighted the interaction between India and Russia in collaboration, particularly after 2000, and the scope of from 2000 onwards, I think, and the scope of further bilateral cooperation in the energy sector.
Just for faced in the context of rural energy security. You know, on the one hand, India as a whole is facing a problem in terms of lack of insufficient energy resources to meet the growing demand and to meet the growing developmental challenges. But within India, we also know that the rural sectors are facing even more severe challenges in terms of their access to energy. So I'm going to talk about this particular sector today.